You're on.
Welcome to Legalized Negligence, where we discuss Florida Statute 768.21, subsection 8, Florida's Wrongful Death Act. Um, and just as a disclaimer, we are not attorneys. I forgot how that part goes. Philip, can you take over?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're not attorneys. We're just people who have lost loved ones due to medical malpractice, and we just share our stories. We always encourage people to look things up for themselves. Don't trust us. If we say something that's interesting to you, go out there and look it up yourself. But we don't give legal advice. So there you go.
Thank you. I wouldn't want to
Although
say it wrong and
we,
somebody, you
we
know,
we do want to play attorneys on TV someday.
yeah, that would be fun. Um, so so here we are on it's Tuesday, February 13th. And just wanted to do a little update about Senate Bill 248. Um
So the last we heard anything about it was on the 22nd of January, which was about a little over 3 weeks ago, where they heard it in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And we've really not had much since then, have we?
I mean, I'm sure there's been a lot of communication at the Capitol in lots of offices, but as far as being added to any agendas, it has not made any progress after that date. So, um, this is week 6. Session ends on March 8th. So we have roughly 2 weeks left, 2.5 weeks left. Um, so that's where we're at.
What are your thoughts? Do you think that it's just going to go away, or do you think that I mean, I'd like to think that they're studying all the information that we've sent to them, before they send it to the next committee. Remind me that it's policy was the next committee,
Fiscal policy and
oh,
then rules.
and then rules, and it hasn't made it onto any of their meetings yet. So
No, I think they're waiting on the House to move. It's really unusual to go 6 weeks with one bill in the Senate moving, but not the one in the House. Um, and there has to be a reason, is what I'm saying, because in too many previous sessions, we've seen it fly through the House and not move in the Senate. So usually, if it's moving in one, most bills that are going to pass move in both, and then they reach their goal.
you've got a lot of contacts in the House. I know you've spoken with Representative Lopez, with Beltran, with Will Robinson, and several others. I think if I remember right, you even had a meeting with Renner, didn't you?
Over the summer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
The My meeting with his office on January 22nd was postponed when I arrived that day at in the morning time. It All of his staff was in a meeting and nobody was available, so we had to reschedule. I was unable to pick a date at that time, so I did not. And but yeah, I met with him in his district office in Palm Coast over the summer. But usually when one bill is stalling like this, there's a problem. And I think it's first and foremost important to just recognize Senator Yarborough, because despite what happens, he did something historical this session, and he allowed the people to stand in the Senate and speak on subsection 8. And to my knowledge, that hasn't ever happened before. So that in itself was groundbreaking, was huge. And I appreciate him for that. Um I can see his effort that he's putting into this. And anyone that takes this bill on is taking on a huge topic. Like, there's nothing easy about this. People are either going to like you or not like you. Like, even me as an advocate, people are either going to like you or not like you. They start to create conclusions on a person, they start to judge them, they start to harass them in some cases. So this topic is so controversial, and I'm very appreciative that he's even taken it on in this far.
Yeah, I've been arguing with myself. There are times I get disappointed with him. But at the same time, I remind myself that, he's done something pretty historic here. He was willing to step out and let it be heard in at least one committee so far. And that's more than has happened in the past. And, so I don't want to talk bad about him, but I would like, he asked in the judiciary hearing, he asked that people send him information. And I know I know that you have, I know that Travis has, I know that surely others have, and I've not heard anything back from him. And so it just creates speculation, when you
Well,
don't.
he did reply to that first email you sent.
Well, I'm talking about one since the 22nd. He hasn't replied to anything since the 22nd. He was very responsive before the 22nd.
Mhm.
In fact, I remember one night I had to get out of bed and reboot my computer to respond to an email that he sent. He was working so late that night. I think if I remember right, I got a text from you and I was already in bed. And I said, well, let me go reboot my computer and see what he's asking. And but since the 22nd, he just hasn't responded to anything. And I'm not going to be critical of him for that. It may be that he's just overwhelmed with stuff that he's trying to read about and research, and he's got a big decision to make here. So I'm not going to be critical at this point. But
Yeah, I'm sure he's hearing from a lot of people. I know, it's I've sent him stuff too, and he's got to have his hands full and be very busy with all of the different, you know, balancing acts, so to speak, that people are sending in, I'm sure. Um, but one thing that legalized negligence has said from the start, from the get-go, is how to approach the legislators. And I know we stand solid in approaching them with respect, with kindness. Um, so I just want to emphasize on that because that can go a long way in communication. And I think it's important for other people to learn the same type of approach, that they too may have a better outcome. You don't always have to agree with someone, but if you can at least respect their opinion, you just might learn something.
and that's something that we've lost in our society overall. Yeah, I think social media has played a big part in that, and then COVID really played a big part in that. Um, People just have learned that there are no repercussions for being rude online, and they've kind of lost all of their civility. If I'm going to say something to somebody face to face, there's a lot that goes into how I say that to them. If they're twice my size, I'm not going to be rude to them because, they might decide to rearrange my dental work. But I think that social media caused us as a society to not be as civil as we used to be. And then there was a lot of anger that came during COVID that people suppressed, and I think it's starting to come out. And everybody wants something instantaneously, when in fact it takes years for things to happen sometimes in the legislature. You've
That's what I was actually about to say. I had a conversation with my son on the way to school this morning. Is it seems like everybody wants it now, now, now. Like if you think about these cooking videos that people use stuff like CapCut or whatever, and they're making, I actually used barbecue chicken for an example this morning. You see the chicken, it's being cleaned, it's being cut up, it's baked already, it's done, and then they put barbecue sauce and they eat it. But in real life, that takes a lot of time.
You know, that
So,
reminds me of a funny story. I used to, after I got out of the medical field, I started a home remodeling business, and people would call me and want me to remodel their kitchen or remodel their bathroom or something. I had a woman actually say to me one time, she wanted me to remodel her entire kitchen. And so I went over and looked at the job and I said, okay, this is going to take like 4 to 5 weeks that you're not going to be able to use your kitchen. And she said, well, I don't understand it because I watched something on television on this old house and they did it in like 30 minutes. And I just kind of, I stopped and I thought, are you serious? You, have you never heard of the word edit? You know, you really think they did all
right.
that work in 30 minutes?
No, it's like she wanted a cap cut job. It's like
Yeah.
people want the legislator to cap cut the whole situation when cap cut is editing. It's putting into a fast process something that actually takes a lot of time. I mean, it's unrealistic to think we are going to get everything we want all at once and have our way. Okay.
Yeah.
In this day of age, this society, with this group of people, it's just not going to happen that way. It takes time. And I'm not mad at the time that it's taking because it's all part of the process. You know, we have to, I know you asked early in this podcast, do I think it's going to go away? As long as I'm here, I know it's not ever going away. And I
I'm,
think they know that too.
yeah, I meant this year. Do you think it's just they're gonna put it on a back burner and forget about it and wait till next year?
Well, I think that over the time between this year and next year, if nothing happens this year, there's still a lot of conversation to be had between the end of this session and the beginning of the next session. And remember, I did the same thing last year with Senator Yarborough. I was in touch with him all summer. I pretty much knew everything that was coming before session started. So not much was a surprise to me. Um, and again, that resorts back to those people who think it's just all going to happen at once and they're going to get everything they want. A lot of people spend months, finding supporting facts and evidence and documentations and all these to cite the articles where they get their facts from. That doesn't just come overnight. And I know you know that because you've cited a lot of things in your findings. But it's a piece of work. And the fact that he's even willing to put in that work on this is, I admire him for that.
Yeah, it's like you've heard me say. I think, in fact, you and I even had some friction between us one time because I was going to respond to Yarborough about something, and it took me 5 days to put my email together because I had a lot of research to do if I was going to answer his questions. And you can't just sit down and hammer something out without citing your sources and giving your facts and all. It took me like 5 days to get, a one-page email written to him. But when I got it to him, he had all the links he needed, he had all the facts he needed. So you think that one instance is like 5 days, and then he's got to sit there and read it and look up the citations that I gave to him and then come up with a response. Yeah, it's a process. It is not an event.
Right.
But
Yeah. So I don't know who will be the chair of Judiciary Committee next session. I don't know if it's going to even be someone who will let a bill like this be heard. That will all come with time that we find those things out. Senator Yarborough was chair for 2 years, and I don't know if they can be the chair of a committee for more than the 2 years. I'm not sure.
do you know how much longer he has? I mean, he can still be a senator for several more years, right?
Yeah, he could have still been a House rep, but because a Senate seat became available in the Jacksonville area, he took it, and so he moved up to that sooner than he he didn't have to, but he did. So yeah, he still got, this was his first 2 years being a
Yeah. And
senator.
my point in asking that question is if he is a brand new senator, the last thing you want to do is alienate him now, because you might need to talk to him in the future. So you don't want to get him on your wrong side, when he still has to. You'd rather become his friend now and know that you can have conversations with him in the future for another 4 or 6 years until he terms out.
Well, I really do feel like we have a good line of communication, and you know, there's a lot of people that have rallied from day one, kill the bill, without trying to talk to him, without offering suggestions or ideas, just because they didn't like it, or maybe because they didn't understand it. Um, but I've always thought that he was a great person. Even when he was a House rep and he voted yes in the House on this bill, I knew that his heart was always in the right spot and his mind. But when you involve politics, which I'm still new to the whole politic world, um, it's different, and there's different rules they have to play by. So I know that he means well, and perhaps the bill came across as something bad to a lot of people, but since day one, I could always appreciate it because I saw the effort. Now, I
Yeah,
did reach out and I did meet with him in his district office in Jacksonville and talk about ways how it could be improved, and he listened, but a lot of people weren't doing that.
yeah, and that comes from the way that Americans have been uh, taught that how to protest something. They think that you're supposed to get out there and shake your fist and scream and yell, and all of a sudden they're going. Well, to me, that's no different than a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum. The 2-year-old uh, isn't old enough to understand that ain't going to get him anywhere. You know,
Right.
but as you get older, you learn that maybe a more civil approach to this, a logical approach to it, have a conversation with them, have several conversations, and you'll get further. But as you and I have seen recently, some of those people who were screaming, kill the bill, we'll take nothing less than kill the bill. Suddenly they're changing their tune a little bit, aren't they?
Oh, they are, and I'm glad to see that they're learning. Um, we've all been there, done that, but it's always nice to have a respectful approach. And one thing that's been heavy on my mind lately, this is kind of unrelated to the topic we're on, is that most people know when I went to Tallahassee on January 8th, 9th, and 10th, I had the Tampa News with me on the 8th and 9th. And I started months in advance reaching out, asking for appointments with legislators, and had so many that I missed three and had to cancel one. And the only bill sponsor that didn't have enough time to meet during one of those 3 days, I'm not going to say any names, was was shocking that they couldn't take a meeting when they know why I was there, and when I did see them in the hallway and had the news crew had already left, they just kind of acted like, well, why didn't you stop by? And I, like, I'm not the person to intrude. If you didn't want to set a meeting with me, I might stop by if I happen to see your name on the door and I'm going by your office. I'm not going to go out of my way to take the news to you when I've already been told that you don't have time.
Yeah.
So it was really disappointing. Something I firmly believe in, and I don't know who else thinks this way, but if you're going to carry a bill, no matter what that bill is, this bill or any other bill, you have to stand behind it and support it. You are the face of that bill. You are the connection between the people and the bill moving, so to speak. So you have to show up and speak when you're asked, in my opinion. It's just like it's a job, it's any job. If you're the cook at a restaurant, then you don't not go and not cook, So I was so disappointed that this certain bill sponsor showed such a lack of interest in championing the bill, that really made me wonder, what is their intentions? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't remember who it was, but I remember hearing a story about one of them who said, well, I'm just not going to vote one way or the other. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, wait a minute, you have a duty to the people who elected you to vote, one way or the other. Your vote may not be what all of your constituents want, but that's a responsibility that you have. And
Yeah, I remember that comment, and it didn't sit well with me either because I thought they didn't say it directly to me. I was told that they said it, but what if it was their vote that made the determining factor, you know?
yeah, and I've talked about this in a previous podcast where a right and a duty are two different things. I mean, you have a right to free speech. Doesn't mean you have to exercise it. You can choose to not say anything. But when you're elected, you have a duty to your constituents. And one of the things they elect you, the biggest thing they elect you to do is to vote on the bills that come before the legislature. And if they say, well, I'm just not going to vote one way or the other, well, then you need to be recalled, as far as I'm concerned. The people elected the wrong person if you're not going to vote either way. you know
Yeah, I believe the vote should be there for sure. Because like I said, it could be that determining factor as well. No, and so I guess something else that's been heavy on my mind is, and I don't know, I'm just speaking on observations and thoughts and everything that happened so far in these 6 weeks of session. I mean, you saw January 22nd. There was an overwhelming amount of people in support of the bill the way it is, the way it's written now with the amendment. And I don't know this, but what if next session somebody brings a bill, another House rep or senator, that adds caps to med mal claims for non-economic damages and does not repeal subsection 8? What could that do to the people?
Yeah, I mean, I understand you're posing that as a hypothetical, but it's something to think about, like, and that goes to making sure you think about every possibility so that you know how to argue against that if it becomes a reality. Um, yeah, I mean, that could happen. This bill could not pass this year. It's a possibility that subsection 8 won't be repealed. And then, somebody next year says, well, okay, let's add some caps. Let's make them even lower than $500,000. And that, in my mind, that opens up the door to the conversation that I try to have with people all the time. Uh, it comes down to the people. If the people don't get involved, those are the sorts of things that will happen. If the people just scroll through something on Facebook and they don't get as involved as you or others have gotten involved, those are the kind of things that your government's going to wind up doing to you. And
That's a scary thought.
it
That is
is.
a scary thought. I mean, to add caps and not repeal subsection 8, that is not what I don't think that's what we want. So, the way that Senator Yarborough was attacked this session for the bill he did have, it also showed the amount of support of people behind the caps. And that's what makes me think now we know. And this year, the repeal was in there. Now, I don't think he would ever bring a bill that did not repeal subsection 8 because his whole purpose of Senate Bill 248 was to repeal subsection 8.
Mm,
So I'm not necessarily saying that I think it would be him. I'm just saying anyone could do it.
Yeah, and he's gone on record now saying that subsection 8 is unjust. So he can't backpedal from that.
No,
So
I believe his heart is pure and he does want to repeal subsection 8.
yeah, and some of the others that we know Book did. Is it Al Burton? Is that his name? Al
Al
Brit?
Britain.
Yeah, Al Britton. He even recognizes that subsection 8 is unjust, but he's the one that thinks there needs to be some balance, and we haven't been able to convince him. Well, the balance comes in if the people have to give up something in the form of caps, then the doctors and nurses and hospitals need to give up something as well. If you want to balance it, that's how you balance it. But he hasn't quite got his thinking straight on that.
Well, the other, as far as the word balance, the other thing that comes to mind for me is that next session, what if there's a bill? And I know I'm full of all these what ifs. What if somebody brings a bill to repeal half of the subsection and not all of it? Actually, there's already a bill like that, House Bill 77 and Senate Bill 310. So, you know, is that the balance that the people in the legislature would let move? I don't know.
Well, they haven't come right out and said it, but I would think, based on how government is supposed to work, and you've heard me talk in the past about what the House does and what the Senate does. And the House represents the people, the Senate represents the state. And so maybe the balance is the greater good. It might be, some people might think it's good for them, but when the Senate looks at it and goes, well, it may be good for you, but here's how that is going to harm the state. We would all like to see, um, I don't know, make up something. We would all like to see that we could say, get free college tuition. Everybody wants to go to college for nothing. Well, you can't go to college for nothing. The buildings have to be paid for, built and paid for. The professors have to be paid to go in and teach. I mean, there's all kind of, so where does that money come from? So that money would come from tax dollars. So it's not free. You're not getting free college. Somebody's paying for it. Um, but where that would be harmful to the state is they would have to increase your taxes to pay for that. So the people's representatives looks at it and goes, well, it would be great if everybody could get a free education. The Senate looks at it and goes, yeah, that might be great, but it's going to harm the state because the people are going to have their taxes increased. You know, so to me, that's should be the balance that they're looking for. And in our case, with subsection 8, yeah, we want access to the civil court like everybody else has. And based on the belief that doctors are going to leave the state if that happens, the Senate is saying, yeah, but we're going to lose doctors and then people won't have access to health care. And that's where our argument needs to be, is showing them that those stats that the lobbyists are showing you are not accurate. Doctors are not going to flee the state because of that. So readjust your thinking. You know, with regard to doctors who go bare, get them to understand if you require all doctors to carry medical malpractice insurance, then there's more money paid into the insurance reserves. And then, therefore, there's more money available if a doctor gets sued. So you just have to, focus in on what we need to instruct them to do
Right. And
and
I
then shift their thinking.
I think it's important too that, lately I've seen a couple um posts that say, the doctors are killing people. And again, I want to reiterate that I don't believe these people go to work thinking who can be the next one, I just don't think that, and that's my thoughts on that. So I think it's important to recognize that we do have good doctors. We do have good people taking care of people. I've worked for some of the best pediatricians. They have helped shape me into the mother that I am today. And um, this is not who we're talking about, though. We're talking about the bad actors, the bad medicine, the medical malpractice, wrongful death. Those people. We're not like putting this on the good doctors.
Yeah.
Um,
There are doctors and there are nurses who have intentionally gone into work looking to kill people, but there are so few of them, they wouldn't even show up on a pie chart. It's like the number of them are so small, they wouldn't even show up if you tried to graft it. Um, but what subsection 8 does is if they do make a mistake, it doesn't force them to be accountable by having to answer in court. And we know what the problems with the Department of Health and ACA are, so they're not answerable there either. And what you were saying earlier made me start thinking about there's a lot of people that don't really understand the argument about damages because there's different types of damages and which damages are going to be capped. You know, Yarborough's bill did not do anything to the economic damages. And those economic damages are the ones that would cover future medical care if somebody were to survive a negligent incident. It's the non economic damages, the pain and suffering damages that his bill addressed. And it really, I'm sure I'll catch heat for saying this, but it really disappointed me when I put a post in the group asking people if they would like to have a roundtable discussion about torts and damages and caps. And out of 340 members, you were the only one who responded and said, yeah, I'd like to take part in that discussion. And I'm thinking, well, then who are these other people? Didn't they lose a loved one? Wouldn't they like to discuss this and we can all become more educated on it and be able to go to our legislators and talk about this intelligently? And I was like, I can't believe not only you said I want to be a part of that, and nobody
well,
else
yeah,
responded.
and I don't know why I was the only one, but I'm glad you asked the question and that we could see who was going to comment on it. But I'll probably catch heat for saying this, and I'm not in any way downplaying the other testimonies that we heard on January 22nd, because I was in that room in front of those people, next to those people, behind those people. I saw those people in front of me, and it was tough. It was tough to see those people injured by what they said was medical malpractice. But you know, and again, I'll probably catch heat for saying this, what I would give for my dad to have been injured but still alive. A 9-inch long blood clot. All right, maybe he needed his leg amputated. That sounds horrible, but he'd still be alive. And I really felt like the voices of the people whose loved ones are deceased due to wrongful death, those voices were not given the opportunity to be heard, because this leads me to another topic. We have subsection 8. We see how many people are involved with repealing it. Not a lot. Not a lot of people even know about it, and maybe not even a lot of people fall into the category. But when it comes to something like caps, now you have a whole nother population who is interested and may not even know about subsection 8 because they haven't experienced the loss of a loved one due to med mal and not being able to access the civil courts. So while my heart felt for those people who were injured, there was a huge part of me just sitting there like, if my dad could be alive in this room right now, just injured, I might think differently about all this. but my dad isn't alive anymore because of someone else's reckless behavior that I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. And I do believe I said that part. But I think the emphasis should be on the reason of the bill, subsection 8, and who that affects. People like us.
Yeah.
Those other people, they were there because of the cat part. They didn't much have anything to do with subsection 8.
Yeah, and you're making a very clear distinction there. Until Yarborough's bill was heard this year, it was people who wanted access to the civil courts who were going to talk. This year, you saw all kinds of people who had access to the civil court, but they just wanted to make sure that they were going to get a fair shake when they went to civil court. I'm thinking there were two guys in wheelchairs. There was a couple of family members that talked about loved ones at home that needed round the clock care. There was a little girl losing the fingers on her hand. Those people currently have access to the civil court because they survived the medical malpractice. Now they're concerned about, are you going to cap me on my pain and suffering damages? So you're absolutely right. Those are two different arguments. And until Yarborough's bill came up this year, there was only the one argument about we can't get into court. Now we got a separate argument. We can't get into court, and you want to cap what we can get if we do get into court.
Yeah, it wasn't the time or the place, but I just wanted to talk to some of those families and say, I'm sorry for what happened, but my dad died of medical malpractice and I couldn't even access the civil courts. So, while everybody's giving Senator Yarborough the rundown on how horrible his bill is and how they don't like it, I'm just like, have that many people lost focus of the goal here? His goal was never to, take away from the people who are living and suffer medical malpractice. His original intent, that he's always said, was to repeal subsection 8. But considering it hasn't ever got a hearing in the Senate, he thought he would do something different. And in return, we heard more from people who have been injured or their family members and lived where they didn't want caps versus people who actually fall into the subsection 8 category. That was it wasn't shocking to me because we already have a very low number of involved people that, speak up, but it was just, I don't know, it was bitter.
Yeah, and I think there's even a deeper issue there and it's like the thing that I'm trying to point out is that when the state doesn't hold the medical licensee, whether it's a doctor, nurse, or hospital, accountable, then that means that person is still out there practicing their form of medicine or nursing. And that was the issue that I brought up to the Department of Health when I wrote my appeal after they closed my mom's case. I said, by not holding this nurse accountable, she's at the bedside of somebody else today. And is she going to be negligent in her care with that person? Also, the nurses who train under her are going to see that she got away with negligence. So that teaches them that they can get away with negligence. The nurses who were her peers, who had been working with her for years and years, are going to say, well, she got away with it, so maybe I can get away with it too. And even if they never actually do that, the thought goes through their mind that, hey, they got away with that. And the state's responsibility is to say, if I let that nurse go back into that hospital, or I let that doctor operate on somebody else, any death that happens after today is the fault of the legislature because we had an opportunity to do something about it and we didn't. And that was the point I made to the Department of Health in my appeal. If you don't hold this nurse accountable, then anything that she does in the future that harms a patient is on you.
Well, that's like the same for the doctor that did this to my dad. He knows I couldn't bring him to a civil court, so now he knows. It's kind of like now they know. Now they're aware.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to, as frustrating as it is, we have to just tell ourselves, well, at least we got it on record. You know, at least I did that much. I got that much on record. And if I find out that that doctor or nurse has harmed somebody in the future, I can then go back to the state. You know, it's kind of like when like when a judge will release a prisoner, you know, or not give them a high bail and they get out and then they go and repeat the offense
Do it
again.
again.
It's the exact same thing.
Right.
And there are judges who regret granting letting somebody go, and then they go out and they rape or they murder all over again. And how do you explain that to that family? The system had the person, they could have held them accountable, but instead they let them go.
Right.
And that's where, Travis will tell you, he's heard me say this more times. He gets sick of hearing me say it. It always goes back to the people. If the people aren't going to get involved in their government, then you got the government that you deserve. If you're not going to read and do research and stay in communication, I've had to say to people, they say, well, I only had 3 minutes to talk, or I only had 1 minute to talk. No, you had the entire year to talk. There's no reason that you couldn't be communicating with them all year long. So don't complain about the fact that 100 people showed up and your time was limited to a minute. You had 365 days that you could have talked to them.
But Philip, those people spend 330 days or 305 days complaining and figuring out how to, get the names of bills changed because they don't like it, or posting negative stuff or tagging negative stuff for people. And while some people are doing research and making connections with the legislators and making a plan for the next session, those people that are just BSing around wonder, oh, why not me? I didn't know that. Well, why not you? Why didn't you know that? You know? So it's the world that we live in, and hopefully their eyes will be open and learn how to do things a little bit more successfully. Now, I didn't learn overnight. It took me a while. Sure, I hung out with the wrong crowd of people when I first started this, but you live and you learn, and now I'm moving forward.
Yeah,
So
and it's like when you and I spoke this morning, and I said I would rather be right than consistent. And what that means is I'll change my points of view on things as I learn new information, and that keeps me right. Versus I'm going to stand my ground and stick by what I believe, and regardless of what new information comes along. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the guy who's willing to evolve through knowledge and education. And if you can show
right.
me something new that changes my thinking on something, I'll read it, I'll listen to it, I'll watch it, and if it makes me more educated on the topic, then that's where I'm going to do it. I've seen these, going back to that post I put in the Facebook group about, would anybody like to join a roundtable discussion about torts and damages, and nobody's responded, with you as the only exception. And so every once in a while, I'll look at people's Facebook pages and I'll see they've gone to the beach, they watched the Super Bowl, they had time to go out to dinner, they got all this time to do all this other stuff. But when it comes to changing a law that affected their loved one and seeking justice, they can't find an hour out of their day or out of their week or their year to sit down and talk about that. And that frustrates me to no end.
Did you see my post this morning?
No, I haven't in a while.
I was talking about the Super Bowl, and I was talking about the quarterback Mahomes, and I was like Senator Mahomes, and I was like, I cannot believe I just said Senator. I got too much politics on my mind. I can't even believe I said that. It was crazy.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that people put their life on hold the way that I did back in 2020 when my mom died. Um, but good gosh, I mean, dedicate some time to it, you know?
No, you have to. I had one person text me, you didn't tell me the bill was being heard, and I'm like, it's online. It's public information. It's actually I signed up the little track the bill where they email you. So
Yeah.
they email you like updates. But you know, I didn't know that I was supposed to broadcast, I didn't know. I didn't mean to hurt anybody or let them down, but
But that's what social media has created.
mhm,
It's like I see people, and I belong to other groups. I belong to motorcycle groups and woodworking groups and tractor groups. I belong to all kind of groups for things that I'm interested in. And you'll see somebody, can somebody tell me what, how to adjust the points on my 1953 Ford Jubilee tractor? Well, by the time you posted that, you could have actually done a Google search and found it yourself.
right,
But instead, you want somebody to give you the answer. And I think social media has created that.
right. I agree.
Anyway, well, did we cover everything that you wanted to talk about?
I think so. Did we cover everything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to do a quick video to let people know that, we're still here. Nothing's happening at the moment that we're aware of, and we haven't forgotten it. We haven't dropped the ball. We're still on it. I mean, I've the past couple of weeks I've been getting into learning about the history of punitive damages, which is a fascinating study. It goes way back into the Bible, where the concept of punitive damages came about. And I know that we're not talking about punitive damages as far as subsection 8 goes, but when you learn the history, and I did find that quote that I was trying to read to you earlier this morning, I did find it. And this deals with punitive, punishment damages. It says damages are designed not only as a satisfaction to the injured person, but likewise as a punishment to the guilty to deter from any such proceedings for the future. So punitive damages hurt so much, they sting so much that it will deter somebody from acting that way in the future or deter others from acting that way in the future.
So without them, why is there any reason to do better?
Yeah, and I know that punitive damages are rarely awarded. Um, but to me, it's like, okay, so you make somebody whole, it's kind of like, think about your all right, let's use the example of a drunk driver hits your car and wrecks your car. To make you whole, they would have to buy you a new car, and that's fair. But to deter their behavior of driving while drunk, you want to hit them with a punitive damage. So the state will step in, and there will be allow the jury to give them a punitive damage, and hopefully they won't drink and drive again. Well, why couldn't the same apply to a doctor? Maybe it's something as simple as not allowing a punitive damage the first time, but if on the third time he's been sued for malpractice, maybe the third time is the charm. And the punitive damage doesn't necessarily have to go to the family. The punitive damage could go to something that would benefit the people as a whole later on, like set up a fund where people who can't afford to pay for a private autopsy, as you did, maybe the punitive damage would go into a fund where the citizens could draw from that and pay for an outside autopsy when a hospital won't provide the autopsy.
Right.
So there's a lot of things there that the legislature can look at that I think would solve this problem and find that balance of the people's interest versus the interest of the state. I think there is a balance there that has to be found. but it's not in adding caps to non-economic damages. That ain't it.
Well, we'll see what happens. 2 weeks left, and it's gonna take an act of God, a miracle, but if anything between here and the end of session happens, but we'll see.
Can I tell you a quick story about an act of God?
Yes,
Very
please.
quick story. There was this big flood, and the guy's standing on the front porch of his house, and a guy comes up in a canoe and he says, "I'm here to rescue you." And he says, "Oh no, God will take care of me. Don't worry about it." So the guy in the canoe goes by, the water keeps rising. The guy is now up on a ladder. Another boat comes by. The EMS people come by and say, "Come on, jump in the boat." "No, God will take care of me. Don't worry about it." Now the water keeps going up. Now he's on the roof of his house, and a helicopter comes by and they shout down at him, "Hey, we're here to rescue you." "No, I don't need your help. God's going to take care of me." So the guy finally drowns, and he gets up to heaven and he asks God, he said, "Why didn't you help me? I put my faith in you." And God said, "Well, I sent you a canoe, a boat, and a helicopter. What else do you want?" You know?
So that was God right there, and he didn't even realize
Yeah.
it.
So when you said it's going to take an act of God, that act of God might be through the work that you and I do, might be through the work that other people do if they get involved. You know, God's not always going to part oceans and, you know, the big miracles that you hear about. Sometimes he works through the people.
Right.
You know. Anyway, I'll get
If
up.
you're watching this and you want to get involved, feel free to watch it or reach out. Watch out, reach out.
Yeah, but when you reach out, watch out because we're.
Yeah, watch out if you reach out.
Well, Sabrina,
So,
thank you for your time. Everybody who's watched this, share it with your friends, like, subscribe, do all the stuff that you're supposed to do with podcasts. And we will keep you updated as we get updated. Bye.
bye.